The Honourable, the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Take two, if I may. I'm pleased to rise today in response to the speech from the throne. As I mentioned last night, sitting there listening to the speech from the throne, and I'm sure that the member for Edmonton-Ellerslie and the member for Olds Didsbury-Three Hills, who just gave us that marvellous and eloquent address, probably felt the same as I did. The pomp, the circumstance, the trumpets, the military uniforms, the head of the RCMP, someone I know very, very well, standing still and not talking for so long, and all of us together in this room feeling the weight of the opportunity and the remarkable responsibility that has been placed in our hands by our neighbours, by our voters. Unfortunately, the speech itself let all Albertans down significantly. The speech described an Alberta that I didn't recognize. An Alberta that exists perhaps in the minds of this government or in the minds of the bubble in which they live, but a speech that certainly doesn't describe the Alberta I grew up in, the Alberta I live in, or the Alberta that is the Alberta that our neighbours, nearly 5 million of them, experience every single day. So I'll start by talking a little bit about that speech. Things that stood out in that speech for me. There are massive cuts to come. This government's agenda of chaos, corruption, and cruelty will be added by cuts. The government admitted that they will increase spending by less, not the same as, by less than population growth and inflation. So all the problems that we've heard about, all the problems of not enough schools, not enough health care facilities, not enough capital spending, not enough public transit, not enough roads, will be exacerbated in the years to come. The speech said that this government will build no new hospitals. No new hospital in South Edmonton. No new hospital in North Calgary or Airdrie. Those hospitals that have been on the docket for so very long. Instead, they will double down on the failed strategy of private health clinics. Even after the Wyant report said that hundreds of millions of dollars are unaccounted for, they're going to double down on this failed strategy. Perhaps most troubling, the throne speech for the first time in Alberta history included significant anti-immigrant rhetoric. And the irony of that throne speech being read by someone who has contributed so much to this community, but who arrived here as a stateless person, who often talks about coming here as a refugee, for her to have to read these government's words of that anti-immigrant rhetoric, it was cruel and it was evil. And it is foreshadowing what is yet to come. Do I believe that members opposite are anti-immigrant? Do I believe that members opposite don't believe that people who look like me or look like so many people in this House can contribute to the community? Of course I don't believe that. Yet they do it. Yet this government talks about it. Yet this government, which takes all its cues from right-wing provocateurs and podcasters in the United States, is now doing this. You know, I was a political commentator for a long time, Madam Speaker. Internationally, I would speak around the world about Canadian politics and what was going on. And people would always say to me, do you have the same rise of the alt-right in Canada that we've had in other parts of the world, in Hungary, all over Europe, even in India and other places? And I would always say, you know what? The one thing that sets the Canadian right apart is that they don't delve into anti-immigrant rhetoric, that they don't actually demonize the other, that they don't demonize migrants, that they don't demonize refugees. I often tell the story of the 2015 federal election in which Canadians were completely compelled by one photo, a photo of a little boy's body washed up on a beach. And when we learned that that little boy's family was in Vancouver, that that little boy could have been in Canada safe and warm and dry, I would argue that the 2015 federal election turned on that. And I would argue that it was the only election in that decade anywhere in the world where the parties were competing to outbid one another for how many refugees we would accept. And it made me proud to be Canadian, which makes it so much more disappointing that this government is reaching for that kind of rhetoric. There was something hidden in this in that speech, not hidden, it was there in plain sight, which said that this government will, for the first time in Canadian history, restrict certain services to Canadian citizens. In other words, legal permanent residents of Canada will not have access to some services, according to the throne speech. It's the first time in Canadian history that any government has dared to do that. Even the government of Quebec, which can have xenophobic tendencies, has never dared to do that. It is, of course, blatantly unconstitutional. But as we learned from this government yesterday, they don't particularly care about blatantly unconstitutional.
Yeah.
That they were willing yesterday and they will be willing in the future, despite the Minister of Finance's protestations that he cannot imagine another instance when they would use it. Perhaps he needs to go back and read his own government's throne speech, because it was right there. This government signaled in that throne speech that they're happy to cut back on people's freedoms. In the same breath as saying we are the freest jurisdiction in Canada. And remember, we have a premier who loves to talk about how she's the most freedom-loving politician in Canada. Certainly the premier that I knew 30 years ago was that. But her actions certainly have not reflected that. And the very next paragraph in the throne speech said, we're the freest jurisdiction in Canada, but not when it comes to trans kids. Not when it comes to parents who want to give their kids the what their healthcare provider says is the best treatment for them. Not to healthcare providers who have sworn an oath to give their patients the best possible care. No, those people don't count. Not to people who, I don't know, want to be able to read anything. Those people don't count. Those freedoms don't matter. Only the freedoms matter that make this government more powerful and that push forward on what this government is. This is not what Albertans want. It's not what Albertans need. It's not what Albertans are asking for. It's not what Albertans require right now. My colleagues and I had a pretty big summer. We spoke to Albertans in every corner of this province, in small towns and big cities. We knocked on over 200,000 doors this summer. The member from Edmonton Highlands Norwood was only 140,000 of those 200,000 doors. She is, in fact, tireless. But we showed up this summer. We showed up everywhere. We showed up at every small town rodeo. We showed up at every dog park. We showed up at every music festival. We showed up anywhere where people were gathering in community and spending time with their neighbors. We also had a series of community gatherings. I don't like calling them town halls, but we had a series of community gatherings that looked very different than the ones the members opposite had. They were the same in one way. Just about the same number of Albertans came. And we managed to do that without $1 million of taxpayer money going to advertise these town halls.
Yeah.
Thousands of Albertans showed up, and they surprised me. Because the reason we were doing these community gatherings, and I should say we ran these very differently. They weren't an opportunity for monologues of hateful tirades that my panel and I would smile and nod knowingly and never challenge anyone unless they disagreed with one another. And I can guarantee to this House, we never threatened any Albertan with violence for having an opinion different than our own.
Especially not a kid.
We certainly did not threaten a child with spanking because we disagreed with what they had to say. We didn't do that. In fact, what we asked people to do was pick up their chairs, turn them around, talk to their neighbors. And what surprised me about this summer is we called this series Better Together. And of course, that was meant to be about separatism. It was meant to be about how Alberta is better together with Canada. But what we quickly learned is that Albertans had a deeper meaning to those words. That Albertans were deeply frustrated with this entire scene of division and anger and hatred that governments around the world, but this government in particular, have been putting on them. A politics of endless anger, a politics that feeds on rage. And they said, we've had enough of it. Alberta is a place where you didn't get a barn built unless your neighbours helped you put up the barn. And what this government does not reflect who we are as Albertans. Look, Albertans are treading water. A lot of our friends and neighbours are struggling. They're just trying to get by. The cost of living is going up and up and up, and a decent life free of financial fear is out of reach for far too many. Albertans see wait times going up, not down. And certainly, the throne speech talks about underutilized hospitals. I have yet to see an Albertan who says there's not enough people in my ER. Gosh, I wish we could rent out those extra empty rooms in the hospital. This does not reflect the reality of Albertans. Albertans see the overcrowded classrooms. They see the absolute dereliction of the dream of Peter Naheed that we could have the best public education system in the world. They see massive job losses. They see that unemployment has increased by 3 points under this government. They've seen this government chase away jobs in the energy sector, chase away jobs in renewables, and chase away jobs because no one will invest in a place if they don't know what country they're investing in. Their endless pandering to separatists, to extremists, hurts investment and chases away jobs. Albertans are proud Canadians. Today we got the news that 10% of all Albertans signed a petition, the largest petition in this province, probably in this country's history, denouncing this government and saying that they are proud Canadians. Indeed, they are forever Canadian.
Yeah.
So, Madam Speaker, I didn't recognize Alberta in that throne speech, but it's why I stand proudly here today as leader of the official opposition in what I'm calling my first formal speech, never mind yesterday, to defend all Albertans who want and deserve better. And it's my hope that everyone out there watching and listening can see how we are presenting a better vision, how my team and I, Alberta's New Democrats, are standing up and defending the real priorities of our province. But before I get into that, I should actually go back to where I wanted to start, which is with deep gratitude. Deep gratitude to everyone who's worked to get me here. It is such a privilege to be the 987th member elected to the Legislative Assembly and the 39th Leader of the Opposition in Alberta. You heard me talk yesterday about the systems that got me here, and I'll come back to that. But it's not just systems, it's also people. Madam Speaker, I'm thrilled that even though I told them to stay home and watch this on TV, that my family made the trek up today. And so we lost my dad in 2012. And a lot of what I owe to my dad. But we persevere. Mom can't be here with us today, but Mom, who I sometimes call my 84-year-old roommate, has been the pillar of strength for me and for my family. And today we're joined here by the kindest person I know, my brother-in-law, a professional ethicist. He's also the most patient person I know because he has to deal with the rest of our family. We're joined here by my remarkable nieces. Asha's on reading week. She's in her first semester of law school at the University of Toronto. Sophia is happy that school's not starting until tomorrow. Grade 11 student at Sir Winston Churchill High School, a champion debater, a brilliant human, and the source of much of my best political advice.
Yeah.
Oh, and then there's my sister. I often tell the story of how when my parents came to Canada, my mother was pregnant with me. So I was born in Canada, but made in Africa. But when they came, they left my sister behind. And I often finish telling the story of, much to my regret, they then sent for her. But she's been there next to me my whole life. Those of you who know her know that I have no bigger fan, no bigger cheerleader, and no bigger supporter. That's a big sister. By the way, she has something posted on the wall at her home. It's a t-shirt from one of our campaigns that I signed. And on that t-shirt, I wrote some life advice for my big sister. Avoid social media. She has not taken that advice. Now, I'm defining these folks in their relationship to me, but I need you to understand that my family and the community around me are extraordinary leaders in their own right. They are extraordinary people who do extraordinary things in the community. Both my sister and brother-in-law work in the healthcare system. They're leaders in the healthcare system, making Albertans safer and healthier every single day, working with families at some of the most difficult moments of their lives and helping them understand that the community is putting their arms around them. And I'm deeply grateful for that work. I'm deeply grateful for the hundreds of volunteers who helped get me elected. You know, Madam Speaker, in the last year, I've had 5 elections. That is too many elections. But in every one of them, we've had extraordinary volunteers come forward. They don't get paid. They probably don't even get a t-shirt. But what they do is get to work with like-minded people who just want a better Alberta. So thank you to all of our electoral volunteers on all sides of this aisle for making democracy work. And I want to thank the residents of Edmonton-Strathcona. They accepted a weird guy from Calgary into their fold. I was a little worried that they would say, "Who and what is this?" They did, in fact, say, "Who and what is this?" But they welcomed me with open arms, helping us get one of the largest vote percentages we've ever had in that riding, because they believed in me too. And I'm deeply grateful to them, and I promise today to represent the voters of Edmonton-Strathcona, the residents of Edmonton-Strathcona, as best I can. And listen, I've got some great footsteps to fill in. Edmonton-Strathcona has been represented by 2 former party leaders. And both of them really showed me the way. Their leadership, their humility, their love for this for this province. Of course, we lost Raj Panu on January 30th of this year. Before there was a Naheed Nenshi in politics, before there was a Raki Pancholi in politics, there was a...
I'm so sorry. But proper names.
I apologize.
Thank you.
Before there was a me in politics, before there was a member for Edmonton Whitemud in politics, I'm still getting used to the new rules, Madam Speaker. I apologize for that. There was a Raj Panu in politics. There was a Raj Panu really providing us that kind of leadership. And of course, I can name her now, after so many years that I couldn't say her name, Rachel Notley. As leader of the opposition and as premier of this province, she showed us that it is possible to do great things without ever, ever, ever compromising on what you believe in. Yeah. And that is a lesson I will never forget. I also should shout out the previous leader of the opposition. The previous leader of the opposition, who I get to sit next to every single day. I think I may have almost broken my House leader on my very first day in the House. but she is still here. The member for Edmonton Millwoods is an extraordinary public servant and a leader the likes of which I've never seen, and honestly, the greatest gift I've been given in the last year and a half. Every one of us is driven here not because of the fame, there isn't any, or the power, or the cushy job. None of those things exist. We're driven here because of the need to serve. I never ever speak in public without using the word seva. It's a Sanskrit word. It doesn't mean service, which most people think it means. It means selfless service. And I'm deeply grateful for the seva of everyone in this house. And I hope that I will be able to conduct my seva, my selfless service, to this community. And I promise that in giving that seva, I will uphold respect for the rule of law, respect for the peoples who've lived on this land for thousands and thousands of generations, respect for the people who've just arrived here seeking a better life, respect for the people from every corner of this broken earth who've come here because this is the place where we know that regardless of what you look like, and regardless of where you come from, and regardless of how you worship, and regardless of whom you love, you belong here. You deserve to be here. You deserve to live a life here of safety, of dignity, of authenticity, of prosperity. You deserve to thrive here. And it is our responsibility to make sure that that happens. I will uphold respect for voters. I will uphold respect for democracy. I will uphold respect for Canada. But I have to say, Madam Speaker, what a way to start. It's only day 2, and the people in this House have already been subjected to a never-ending speech from me yesterday, and they're getting another one today. But I have to say, when the fall session began and I finally got to take my seat, I knew we'd hit the ground running. I spent a year watching every day the proceedings of this House, in the House every day, but I didn't expect this. I sure didn't expect that on my first day in the legislature, the day of the speech from the throne, that I would be joining the largest rally in Alberta's history. Tens of thousands of people standing outside on the steps of the legislature. That day and other days at rally after rally after rally. As citizens rise together against this government's fight against them, against teachers, against parents, and against students. I certainly did not expect to be sitting here until well past midnight last night speaking out for basic fundamental human rights. Yeah. I certainly did not expect that my very first day in House business would be a day where the government did so many unprecedented things. Where this government that loves to show how tough it is, that loves to have the image and the brand that we are the ones standing up for Alberta, has shown itself to be so very weak, has shown itself to be defined by so much cowardice, afraid to hear dissent, afraid to hear anything that might shatter their closely held worldview. And yes, Madam Speaker, Albertans noted one thing last night, that limiting the debate didn't shut us up, but it certainly shut them up. Not one member of the caucus, other than the mover and the minister for a brief intervention, not one member of the caucus stood up. Not one member of that caucus used their voice to defend what was happening. I sat here all night, and I looked over at their faces all night. It looked like an undertaker's convention. You saw a lot of people questioning their life choices and questioning the government that they are in. Now, I should apologize, Madam Speaker, because I used that line earlier, the Undertakers Convention, and I immediately got a text from the re-elected mayor of High River, Mr. Craig Snodgrass, who is, in fact, a funeral director. And the text merely said, Undertakers conventions are fun. I will take him at his word. Why do I feel like I just got myself a ticket to be the keynote speaker at the next Undertakers convention? But I think that the members opposite felt what I felt. I felt the ground shifting underneath us. The government may have thought that at 2:30 in the morning, this horrible situation of their own making was finished. Albertans certainly didn't think that. You know, those of us who live in southern Alberta and the member for Brantford Kananaskis will attest to this. If you happen to be out in the spring, if you happen to catch the exact right moment, you'll hear a crack. And that crack is the ice breaking and the water beginning to flow. And last night I heard that crack in the electorate. I heard citizens. I heard citizens saying, the veil has been dropped. This government is not who we believe they are. Despite their honeyed words about respect, despite the words that they mouth about responsibility, Albertans figured out exactly who this government is. And as the member for Edmonton City Centre said yesterday, in the words of Maya Angelou, when someone tells you who they are or shows you who they are, believe them. And Albertans now believe, and they know exactly who this government is. And late last night I said, this government will rue this day. Members of this government will look back on this day as the day that it all fell apart, as the beginning of the end. And I still believe that, Madam Speaker, because Albertans are so much smarter and so much better than this government gives them credit for. They understand exactly what's going on, and they understand exactly what they value. And maybe those values are encapsulated, maybe just a little bit, in my story, a story that is reflective of so many in this community. So as you heard, my parents immigrated to this country when my mother was pregnant with me. Money was tight. Those first few months were hard. That first winter was almost impossible. My parents ended up in Toronto, smaller city then than it is now. Actually, maybe I've got a bit of time. I'll tell the story. I've told the story many, many, many times. Why in the world did they end up in Canada? See, my parents used to run a hotel in a place called Arusha, Tanzania. That's the base of Mount Kilimanjaro. In fact, I'm excited that the Minister of Education is going to go to my family home very, very soon to do some very good work. But they met a lot of people from all over the world. And some of the people they met were aid workers from the former Canadian International Development Agency. Now, these aid workers, Madam Speaker, used to get the Toronto Star newspaper delivered in their diplomatic pouches. For those members in the House and those listening today under the age of 40, a newspaper is sort of like a tablet, but it's on paper. You can't change it. And when they were done, they would give these newspapers to my dad. My dad was always a voracious reader. And so he would read about this place on the other side of the world. And he said, someday I'm going to go there. And after many, 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 many years, my dad and my mom had the opportunity to be the representatives of their giant family at a family wedding that was going to be held in England. First time they ever got on a plane, first time that they ever set foot outside of their country. And my dad said, well, if we're getting on a plane, we may as well see this Canada. I don't think they had Google Maps then. I don't think he knew how far that was. But the thing that he was most excited about seeing in Canada was he had seen pictures of the opening of the Toronto City Hall. Now, I want you to picture that building, Nathan Phillips Square, the ice rink, and the building that is kind of curved going around it. And Dad, in those days, couldn't imagine how you could build a building that tall that had a curve in it. And so he wanted to see that City Hall, and see it he did. Don't let me forget to come back to Dad. But they got here. They didn't have anything. They looked in the phone book. For people under 40, just Google it. And they found names that may have sounded familiar, names that may have been Ismaili Muslim names. And they called, and they found a tiny community. And they said, well, let's organize prayer services. Let's organize times that we can get together. So every Friday morning, my mom would wake up, heavily pregnant or with a newborn, and she would strip the sheets off the bed and wash them. And then she would hang them to dry because they didn't have a nickel for the dryer. And she would pray that they would dry in time. In time for what? In the evening, she'd fold up these sheets and put them in a bag, and they would take the subway, and they'd go to someone's house for prayer services. And those sheets would become the floor coverings to lend just a little bit of dignity to that basement. That's where they started. Not a year later, Asians were expelled from Uganda. And for the first time in Canadian history, we accepted a huge wave of non-European immigrants. It changed Canada forever, but it also changed my family forever. One of those immigrants is now the representative of His Majesty here in Alberta. But this little tiny group, this little tiny group of people who could barely get by, who'd been through one winter, who didn't really understand how the rest of the society works, they found themselves suddenly responsible for thousands of newcomers. And they just did it. Because no matter how hard life was, they knew that there were others who needed them. They knew that in a time of struggle, there was also a time for service. And they did that every day. When I was 18 months old, I did my research, I wrote the briefing books, presented them to my parents, and convinced them that the future was in Alberta, that the future was in the West. My mom tells me the briefing book was not really very convincing. It's mostly crayon. But my family packed up all our belongings into a 1974 Dodge Dart and drove across the country to start a new life here underneath that endless sky. We didn't have much growing up. We went with the ups and downs of the Alberta economy like so many Alberta families. Sometimes we were poor. Sometimes we were very poor. But growing up in Marlborough and in Red Deer County, I knew that I was growing up in a community that believed in me. I graduated from outstanding public schools.
Yeah.
The best public schools in the world. My diploma was signed by a Conservative Minister of Education, Mr. Denning, who I spent a lot of time with in the years after that. Sometimes together, sometimes arguing a little bit. But I never doubted his or his government's commitment to public education. I explored the city. I grew to love on public transit. So many bus drivers just spending a moment in their day trying to make my day a little bit better. I spent my Saturday afternoons at the public library, where the librarians indulged me and allowed me to sign out more books than would normally be provided. By the way, years later, I was awarded the Freedom of Expression Award in Calgary, and a bunch of librarians were there. And one librarian came up to me and said, "You know, I remember you. I worked at the Forest Lawn Public Library." And I said, "Yeah, I always tell the story." She said, "I know." And she said, "Now I need to tell you the truth. There was never a limit on the number of books you could take out per week. We just let you think there was so you would read more." Because that's librarians. I learned to swim very badly in a public swimming pool. I went to an incredible public university and got the best education. Trust me, I know. Years later, when I went to graduate school at a very fancy, very famous university, I was very nervous because all the other kids had gone to schools with fancy, famous names. And I realized that my education from the University of Calgary was so much better than anything that they had received. Every step of the way, I was lifted up by the public systems that make life work for young people in this community and in every community. And in 2010, my dad, who always wanted to see that Toronto City Hall, he got to sit in another City Hall. And he got to watch his son get sworn in as the mayor of the greatest city on earth. I don't tell that story because it's extraordinary. Maybe it's interesting in its details. I tell that story because of how ordinary it is. Because it's the story of every family in this community, or it should be. The story of everybody. If you work hard, if you succeed, if you serve, you can succeed. It's the promise of Canada. It's a promise that we haven't always fulfilled. It's a promise we haven't fulfilled to Indigenous people. It's a promise that we haven't fulfilled to everyone who comes here. But it is a promise. And it's a promise that we need to work on every single day. This country's messy. It's bruised. Sometimes it's battered. Sometimes it feels a little broken. It doesn't work all the time. But it's worth fighting for. Because it is one of the few places on earth that this happens, and we take it for granted. A place that says, that kid in Marlborough, that kid growing up on reserve, that kid on a farm, that kid in a downtown of a major metropolis, every single one of them deserves to be a great Canadian and live a great Canadian life right here, right now. Kids from neighborhoods like Marlborough and other places don't get that. Kids from neighborhoods like Marlborough can grow up in cyclical generational poverty. Kids from places like Marlborough can live in a place where no one expects anything of them. Not here. Never here. Never in Calgary, never in Alberta, never in Canada. And that's what we fight for in this House every single day. I love being the mayor. I really did. Fewer rules on what you could say and do. Timer was still pretty bad, though. I really loved it. I loved the opportunity to fix stuff. I loved the opportunity to make the community better. But then I was done. I was done because I'm a Gen Xer, and I've spent my whole life waiting for the boomers above me to retire. And I didn't want to do that to the people who came after. And I said, it's time for new and fresh ideas. It's time for someone else to come in. And I enjoyed those 2.5 glorious years of retirement. I didn't want to get back into politics. I was proud of what we'd accomplished. 11 straight balanced budgets, strong public services, a city that welcomed and welcomes everyone, a city that was named the 3rd best city in the entire world in which to live. I'm so proud of that. I'm so proud of that record. And I'm so proud of the Calgarians who worked hard to make that happen. But like so many Albertans, I watched politics in this province with increasing horror. I watched what was happening in government. I watch politics become more divisive, more cynical, more disconnected from the people that we are meant to serve. I saw leaders using their platforms to stoke fear instead of build hope. I saw decisions being made that ignored the voices of everyday Albertans. I saw rising costs. I saw increasing poverty. I saw sustainable jobs leaving this province. I saw every single sector being held back by a government instead of being supported by it. I saw a growing gap between the promise of this province and the reality too many of our neighbours were facing. And I saw so much corruption. That's why I came back. That's why I jumped back into this world. I didn't miss politics. But what I really knew is that I believe in Alberta. I believe in Alberta that is first and never last. I believe in the promise of this place. I believe in public service. I believe that government can be competent and compassionate. I believe that government can be ethical and good and effective. I believe that we can build an economy that works for people and public services that lift everyone up. I believe that we have a responsibility to ourselves, to our communities, to our kids, and to the future. I believe that we can govern with integrity and we can still be a great government. So I've been in this role as leader of the party for about a year and a half. It took me a while. It took the government a while to bring me in here. No hard feelings. But for about a year and a half now, since I've stepped into the role of leader of the party, I've seen firsthand the challenges facing our province. I've seen families struggling with the cost of living, rising rents, high grocery bills, unaffordable utilities. Price of utilities as much as quadrupled under this government. And certainly we heard the minister today talk about how it's come down, so it's only about 60% higher than it was when this government took power. Recent reports showed that in Calgary, the richest city in the richest jurisdiction in Canada, 1/3 of households face food insecurity. 1/3 of households don't have enough to eat. I'm just going to pause for a minute there. In the richest city, in the richest jurisdiction, in one of the richest countries in the world, 1/3 of people don't have enough to eat every day. That is the Alberta that this government has built. Unemployment, as I said, has gone up 3 points since this premier took power. Youth unemployment is such that 1 in 5 young men in Alberta cannot find work. Youth unemployment has never been higher. The government proposed a jobs plan earlier this summer that didn't actually include any jobs. It just said, if we only told people about jobs, they would take the jobs. Not a week later, the government came back and said, oh, maybe we should give businesses money to create jobs. It was clearly written on the back of a napkin, and it clearly wasn't addressing the very real issues that Albertans are facing. Workers are being asked to do more with less. Many workers don't feel safe at work. They don't feel respected in their jobs. And did I mention so much corruption? And this year, though, we've seen something else remarkable. Albertans standing up. Whether educational assistants standing through a cold Fort McMurray winter, fighting for basic human rights and above poverty level wages. They won. And we're very proud of them for what they've done. But to healthcare workers, teachers, public servants, we're hearing them raise their voice. We're hearing business raise its voice. We're hearing private sector workers raise their voice. And they're raising their voices, yes, with a bit of anger, but mostly in hope. Hope that their work will be valued, hope that communities will get the support they deserve. In education, classes are overcrowded, teachers are overwhelmed, funding is falling behind. We've seen strikes, we've seen lockouts, not because people want conflict. Those teachers chose to go on strike even though they knew they wouldn't get paid. They did it because they were fighting for better conditions, better outcomes, and a better future. In healthcare, emergency rooms are closing, wait times are growing, more and more Albertans are going without a family doctor, prescription costs are rising. When we think about people living with disabilities in this province, we see unspeakable cruelty, taking away $200 a month from people who earn $1,900 a month, forcing them to jump through hoops, massively increasing their rent if they're lucky enough to have a subsidized home. What are the cost savings of this? Are these cost savings that are going to make any difference? Will these cost savings even pay for another Turkish Tylenol deal or botched lab privatization? There's no need to do this. This is done simply out of cruelty. I asked myself when I first started this job, why is this government so cruel? Is this a byproduct of their work? Do they not understand the impact that this is having on everyday people? And over time, I've grown to learn, and I have yet to see evidence to disprove this, that cruelty is not an accidental byproduct of these decisions. Cruelty is the point. Why else? Why else would we go after the most vulnerable Albertans first? But you know what? Despite all these challenges, I've seen incredible strength in Albertans. I've seen incredible resilience. I've seen Albertans stepping up for one another. I've seen communities coming together. I've seen people who believe passionately with every cell of their body in the promise of this place. And every single day I see hope. I see hope for a better future because I know it's easy to fix, it's easy to break, and the government certainly knows how to break things. But I know we can fix what's broken. I know we can build systems that work for everyone. I know we can govern with compassion, competence, and ethics. And I know we can create an economy that lifts people up rather than leaves them behind. But friends, Madam Speaker, through you, I will say to Albertans, we're living in a moment of real uncertainty. Albertans are facing rising costs, strained public services, growing anxiety about the future, and beyond our borders, we see a terrifying world. A world of global instability, of economic volatility, of threats to democratic institutions. These are times that require leadership. This is not a time for division. It's not a time to stoke anger. It's not a time for hatred. It is a time to bring people together because when the challenges are this big, we need to be even bigger. We need to be united, not just as Albertans, but as Canadians. But instead of bringing people together, we've seen a government that chooses distraction and division, that fans the flames of separatism, that fights hard to keep Albertans from actually finding solutions to the very real things that they're facing. Albertans deserve so much better. Albertans deserve a government that sees the threats ahead and meets them with courage, not with cynicism. Albertans deserve leadership that builds bridges, not walls. And Albertans deserve, yes, a premier who understands that our strength comes from standing together, not tearing each other apart. As I said, we've been listening to Albertans. We've been listening to teachers, parents, and students who want every child to have the chance to succeed. We've been listening to doctors and nurses and healthcare administrators who pour their hearts and their minds and their strong backs and their bodies into keeping people healthy and communities strong. To seniors who built this province and to the family members doing their best to make sure people can age with dignity. To new graduates trying to build a life here, to skilled trades workers who keep our province running, to farmers and ranchers who look after our land and who feed the world. To people in oil and gas who just want to be able to provide the world with safe, clean, reliable energy, which is the greatest anti-poverty tool we've got. To small business owners working hard to create jobs and opportunities to others, for others. To leaders, to industry leaders in every field from agriculture to clean tech, energy and manufacturing who see enormous potential in Alberta's talent, innovation and drive. To community leaders, advocates, volunteers, people in the nonprofit sector, even Albertans living on income support, people who remind me every day that this province runs on compassion. And we do it because we look after one another with perseverance and with generosity because that's who Albertans are. We've heard frustrations, we've heard challenges, but we've heard courage, we've heard determination, we've heard above all hope. Hope from Albertans who believe this place can be somewhere where everyone gets a fair shot. Hope from people who know that when we look out for one another, there's no limit to what you can achieve. So these conversations this summer reaffirm what I've always believed. Albertans care deeply about one another, about the land, about their communities, about their families, about their future, about Alberta, and about Canada. So here's what you can expect from me in my new role. I'll fight every day. I'll fight every day to make life more affordable for Albertans. I'll fight every day to invest in public health care and education because they're the foundation of a strong and fair society. I will protect your pensions, your rights, and your future. I will work with businesses large and small, workers and innovators to build an economy that works for everyone. I will honor the voices of teachers, nurses, seniors, and students, not just in words, but in action. I will lead with integrity. I hope I will lead with humility, and I hope that you'll keep me honest if I don't. And I'll lead with a deep respect for the people of this province. I will govern with pragmatism and effectiveness, because our goal on this side, my goal, is not power. I don't need that. My goal, and all of our goals, is Seva. And I will always, always, always listen to Albertans. My goal will be to unite rather than divide, because I know, as Albertans told us over and over this summer, that we are better together. And there's some simple things here. Albertans have never been afraid of audacious goals. But this government and so many like it around the world want to tell people things will never be better than they are today. They want to say to folks, you got to defend with everything you've got, every crumb you have, because those people, whoever those people are, want to take it away. But that's not Albertan. That's fundamentally un-Albertan. You can't dream small under a sky that big. So what are the dreams? I see an Alberta where every worker comes home safe every single day, where dignity and safety are non-negotiable, where people who are able to go to work every day live without financial fear, where every trip to the grocery store doesn't come with just a little bit of terror or the need to put stuff back on the shelves, where Albertans are not forced to make impossible choices between prescription drugs and rent. I see an Alberta where every single person who needs a hip replacement gets a hip replacement, without delay, without fear, and without financial burden. I see an Alberta where every child gets the attention and care they need in classrooms that are vibrant and inclusive and fully resourced. I see an Alberta where healthcare is accessible, where no one is left behind because of where they live or how much money they make. I see an Alberta where teachers are respected, where classrooms are places of endless possibility, not overcrowding and burnout. I see an Alberta where young people can dream big, knowing they'll find opportunity, support, and good-paying jobs right here in Alberta, right here at home. I see an Alberta where every single Albertan, regardless of ability, can live a life of dignity, and it's a life where they are treated with respect. I see an Alberta where seniors are honoured, where they're not worried about their Canada Pension Plan. I see an Alberta where innovators and small businesses can thrive, where innovation is celebrated, where we build prosperity together, and most important, I see an Alberta where we reject division and instead we choose unity.
Yeah.
So today I'd like to give the government an opportunity. I'd like to give the government an opportunity to stand with us, to stand with the opposition and show how we can all stand together for Albertans. Madam Speaker, at the end of my speech, I will move an amendment to the speech from the throne delivered last Thursday, and I hope that the Premier and her caucus will thoughtfully consider it. We should, in fact, we must, as elected Canadians, denounce any talk of separation.
Yeah.
This talk of separation freezes investment. You know, there's head arguments and there's hard arguments. I can make head arguments all day. Every economic study has shown that talk of separatism freezes investment, dries up jobs. We know in this country that Montreal has gone through a half-century of economic decline, 338 head offices leaving Montreal, going to Toronto and Calgary because of the threat of separatism. We've seen it happening already here. We've seen CEOs of major Alberta companies say they're not investing a penny in Alberta until this separatist talk is gone. Those are the head arguments. The hard arguments are even more important. Albertans are proud Canadians. 10% of Alberta's population signed a petition saying they were proud Canadians. I have given a lot of sort of negative things today. I've talked a lot about the challenges that are in front of us, but I've also talked a lot about hope. But hope means nothing unless we're willing to work towards that better future. So before I move this amendment, before I close, I'd like to share a quotation from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I will warn you, I'm going to paraphrase a bit. But Dr. King says, "Now let us begin. Now let us rededicate ourselves to the long and bitter but beautiful struggle for a new world. This is the calling of the children of God, and our brothers and sisters wait eagerly for our response. Shall we say the odds are too great? Shall we tell them that the struggle is too hard? Will our message be that we send our deepest regrets? Or will there be another message of longing, of hope, of solidarity with their yearnings, of commitment to their cause, whatever the cost? The choice is ours. And though we might prefer it otherwise, we must choose in this critical moment of human history." It may seem a bit odd to have a Muslim standing up in this House quoting a Baptist preacher. This is the note I want to end on. I've talked a lot about Seva. I've talked a lot about my family and my community that built me. I want to talk for a moment about faith. Whether you believe in an organized religion or not, I am a man of deep faith. And I know that we as citizens of this world who share this land, as people of faith, as people with little faith, we have so much more that unites us than divides us. And our job is to ensure that we leave this place just a little better than we found it. And we think about those things that unite us, the dignity of every human being, the right of every single person to live an authentic and real life, the absolute necessity of seva, of service, and simply of leaving it better than we found it. I think we find a lot more unity than today's public discourse would give us. So, Madam Speaker, I sure hope that in this role, standing in this place, I will be able to do well and do right by my father, by my family, by my community, by every single one of those people who invested in me in order to be here. And I hope that every single one of us can listen to the words of that prayer that we start every single day with and talk about how we rededicate ourselves to building a better place for all Albertans. I'm deeply humbled to be here. I'm deeply humbled to be in this role, and I like to live my life in gratitude, and today I'm deeply grateful for every single person in this province who devotes their lives to making Alberta better. So with that, Madam Speaker, I would like to put an amendment.
Members, this will be known as Amendment A1. Honourable Member, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's a simple amendment. It's an amendment to reaffirm this chamber's commitment to the promise of Canada. And the amendment reads as follows: to add the following words to the end of the motion that the member from Old Didsbury Three Hills put. And the words are, "And to inform Your Honour that the Legislative Assembly affirms that Alberta and Canada are stronger together." and denounces provincial separatism as extreme, divisive, and economically destructive. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Thank you for the time.